Hi everybody, Armoured PANTZ here, and I have a review of the American line freighted Tier 10 Sheridan. As always, we'll have a complete guide for you, starting with the tech spec and using blitzhanger.com, a great asset that all blitzers should use. And I am a Patreon of that site, and a worthy cause it is too. Now, this is a controversial tank, or rather the firing system is controversial, right, because of the missiles. And there's been a lot of videos about it so far, and I'm going to try to take a different tack, so therefore this video has a few objectives. Firstly, I want to discuss the missile issue itself, the missile firing system, but I want to do that objectively, sensibly. There's been a lot of emotion, hyperbole about this issue. Let's try to have a sensible discussion about it. I try to reach a few logical, constructive conclusions. And also then I want to review the tank on its own merits, review the tank as a standalone vehicle, and how it is as a light tank. Does it perform or not? Now, in my opinion, this tank is not as good as the T92E1 before, and we discussed the reasons for that during the video. I thought the T92E1 is OP. But this is a good light tank itself, right? Even without the missiles, leaving aside the missiles, this is a good light tank, just as the T92E1 before it is good. And if you haven't watched that video, I would suggest you do, because we discussed a lot about missiles and that as well. Now, in this tank, I would run Coca-Cola to get the view range up to 302 meters. There's only one gun option, unlike the previous tank we had two, but it's very similar to the previous Tier 9 gun, right? So basically you've got the XM15OE E4 here compared to the OE3 and the previous tank. 152mm gun and missile system. Heat is your Pramo, and it's also the missile as with the T92E1 before it. DPM seems low, but it's not really in actuality, because you never fire continuously anyway during a game, right? The two shell types are APCR and HE, leaving aside the heat, the Pramo, which is the missile, and you get 240mm of pen and 90mm of pen on the APCR and HE shell respectively. Muzzle velocity is 1000 meters per second, slightly better than the previous tank. In this line, you get 300 meters per second with supercharge, and both shell types are the same, so therefore shell management is a bit easier. Get a 16-second reload if you run gun rammer 17.2 with calibrated shells. I don't think you need calibrated shells with a 152mm gun, but you know, it's up to you. What you do need to do, though, because of that long reload, is make your shots count, right? Don't be wasteful with your shots. It's a very long time to wait for your next one, right? I would run vertical stabilizer, because you fire a lot when you're moving, because it is a light tank. Movement is one of its key strengths. You get a... Now, I would also run improved assembly, I would run engine accelerator, etc. is with this as well. Now, missiles, you get 340mm of pen, or 374 if you use calibrated shells. Now, the muzzle velocity, even with supercharge, is 39 meters per second, only 30 without it. And I mean, what does that mean? Well, it means that something 120 meters away is going to take 3 seconds to reach it, which is crazy, right? So basically a red tank, which is pretty close to you, it's going to take a long time to reach it. But is that true? I'm not sure, and I'm going to use mathematics to explain why I don't think this muzzle velocity is actually true or correct. The tank itself does 65 kilometers per hour, 22 in reverse, and has a great power to ratio and good traverse. It has 10 degrees gun depression as well, 20 of elevation, so therefore it has great gun alignment. What does that mean? Well, gun alignment is basically getting your gun in line with the enemy, and it's quite easy when you have those degrees of elevation and depression. You know, concealment is pretty good. At a tank with 350 meters view range, like the Progresso 65, needs to get within 239 meters of view. However, the Progresso 65 has 227 vis to you, so therefore he's going to see you 12 meters earlier, put a couple of rounds into you. So be aware of that. Its visibility is not as good as many light tanks and medium tanks in its tier. Now, looking at the armor profile, you saw there it has spaced armor all the way around, and I've seen people complain that it gives it unfair advantage because heat and Hesh won't max roll it, right? But that's an advantage for the first 1 or 2 days, right? Thereafter, all experienced tankers, and you've got most of them up in Tier 9, Tier 10, now you just put an AP round through it. A big gun like a Death Star or a Yagaru is going to roll you with AP for 800 to 900 anyway. It's half your hit points, so I don't think that's such a significant advantage. The gun mantlet, as you see, will bounce some shots. One of the key things about this tank is it's bigger, and it doesn't have the angles of the T92E1, and therefore you get far few bounces in it. And those bounces are one of the things that, in my opinion, made the T92E1 OP. This tank is not OP. It doesn't get the bounces that your tank does. It absorbs a lot of damage. It's also quite flat in terms of its design. It actually is very similar in its design to the amphibious US tanks of the Second World War. They're of course designed to displace water, so therefore they had a lot of flat surfaces designed for water displacement to make them float. And this tank, made by General Motors, of course it's not an amphibious tank, but it does have those sort of, because it's a lightweight tank, right? It made of aluminium. It doesn't have those acute angles on the armor, so it doesn't get the same amount of bounces. By the way, the tank is made of aluminium, right? So, or aluminum, as our American friends would call it. So that's why it's so vulnerable to being penetrated. But this tank is fast, it's quick, it has great power to weight ratio. It actually has a turbocharged engine. It has a turbocharged turbo diesel engine. So that's why it's so quick. But this tank doesn't get the bounces that the T92E1 did before, at least not in my experience of playing it. And therefore, just standalone, I don't think it's quite as good as the previous tank. Now, you've only got one life, so Rocket, this tank is about the missiles. So let's have a look at the missiles in effect, right? This tank, I believe, is excellent without the missiles. And the missiles just add to it a little bit of extra stuff, which makes it that even a little bit better, right? Now here's what I'm talking about why I don't believe the muzzle velocity in this tank. This Sheridan is moving away, right? He's accelerating. By now he's probably doing about 35, 40 kilometers an hour. How does a projectile at 39 kilometers an hour catch him? Mathematically, it shouldn't be possible, right? Again, if we look at this shot, this is something you wouldn't be able to do with just a normal Pramo round, because you couldn't penetrate the Jagdpanzer like this. You would fire and it'd probably get a bounce. But you see he's moved slightly, and I'm able to guide the rocket then into the vulnerable part. And when you see it in slow motion, you see how I was able to do it in real time. Right in, I roll him for 525. You wouldn't be able to do that because with a normal Pramo round, because it just would have bounced. Again, looking here, a switch up, right? I fire before the E75 comes in to play, and then I smash it into the vulnerable side of him. You wouldn't be able to do that with normal Pramo, right? If you fired, you would have missed, or it would have had to wait for him to come up, in which time he would have put a round into my ally. So therefore, this tank does give significant advantages with the missiles, and this tank doesn't need them, right? You can leave the missiles aside. Look at the sequence of play here with me firing on the motion, right? So firing on the motion, right, I'm just spamming Pramo at him, right? And because now normally when you're firing into a heavy tank here, he's moving around and he's able to stay in cover, right, go behind the rocks, etc. He can't do this because I just guided wherever he moves. Look at this shot. This is impossible with any other type of projectile, right? Let's look at it in slow motion, right? I fire into the air, right? Fire up into the air, and then I guide it down onto the roof of the mouse and roll him for almost 500. That's not possible with any normal projectile that we have in the game. Now, that's why this tank, that's why I'll be discussing T92E1, that's why you don't need to have missiles in this game. You just don't, because it's giving you an unfair advantage, and it allows you to do things that are not possible with other shell types. And this tank doesn't need it. This is a good tank anyway. But by adding in missiles, you just add an additional offensive component to the weapon system that is not necessary. I shouldn't have been able to pen that Yagaru. I shouldn't have been able to fire that shot on the E75. And I definitely shouldn't be able to drop around onto the roof of the mouse, right? That mouse is trying to do his job as a heavy tank. He's trying to seize a strategic position on the map, pushes his armor forward. He's virtually impenetrable, especially by a light tank front on. But I can drop a missile onto his roof, right? And I roll him for, you know, quarter of his hit points. And that, I think, is not fair, because firstly it allows, and we discussed this a bit in the T92E1 video. Firstly, it allows me to do things that are not possible with other missile or other projectile types, right? Secondly, it doesn't allow the mouse to do his job, that is pushing forward, taking the fight to the enemy and seizing strategic positions on the map, which is what a heavy tank's supposed to do. Secondly, sorry, that's thirdly, isn't it? I can't even count. Thirdly, right, It means the skills of that mouse driver, that is angling his armor, bouncing shots, are totally out the window. How can he stop a shot landing on his roof? It's just not possible, right? So basically it negates all the skills that that guy has spent a long time building up. You know, and you know, he's acquired a set of skills, and again, I know I sound like Liam Neeson now, but he's acquired a set of skills, you know, to play a heavy tank in a particular way, to bounce shots, to help him and his team. And they all go out the window. All that skill set that he's spent thousands of games and hours and weeks and maybe years and years acquiring are out the fucking window when some asshole like me comes along and drops a fucking missile on his roof, right? You know, so it's totally unfair, but also it goes against everything that Blitz is about, right? We're going to have a look at some gameplay here in Mayan Runes. 2 games we're going to look at, by the way. I don't use promo. I don't use the missiles, other than as standard promo when I want the extra pen, because bear in mind these heat shots give extra pen. So if I do use heat here, it's not for the missiles per se, it's only to get the extra pen, right? So basically I play it just as normal heat, because I believe that that's the fairest way to play this tank. Again, standard light tank play, I'm going to use the speed of the tank, get into position, and bring this big gun into play, which is why I'm going towards C to support my meds. Now, there is something which is broken in this tank, right? And it's applicable to only one particular situation. If you're playing this tank on a mobile device, and if you have it set up so that you can turn your turret without switching your aiming, you can have your aiming pixel on the enemy tank, have your turret faced away, fire, and the shot with the missile hits. You don't need any skill, you don't need to guide the missile. All you need to do is keep the aiming roundel, the aiming pixel on the enemy tank. Your turret can be faced, your tank or your turret can be facing the other way. Fire the missile and it hits. This is in other videos by other YouTubers, etc. Now, I don't have my tank set up that way, and I never have done. There's a particular reason for that. I like my turret to be facing the way I'm facing. Why? Well, it's basic combat sort of theory, which is, and it's basic sort of engagement theory. This is why soldiers are trying to always look the way their weapon is pointing, or always rather the other way around, have their weapon pointing the way they're looking, right? Those split seconds that it takes to move your weapon back into your line of sight can be the difference between living and dying, or in the case of Blitz, getting a shot in or getting hit, right? Now, so I don't play that way, but I've seen and observed other players have discussed it in my clan, and I've seen it on forums, and I've looked at other YouTube blitzers as well. It is so basically this works. So if you play on a mobile device like an iPhone or whatever, you have it set up so that you can swing your turret around without moving your aiming pixel. You can have your turret facing or your tank facing away. You fire and it delivers the missile every time without fail. There's no skill involved. You don't have to do anything. Bam, that's broken, right? That's not right. Especially not for tier 10 tank, where you're supposed to be displaying the top skills available in Blitz, right? So, you know, I think it's broken, and I think that has to be fixed by Wargaming, right? I mean, you can't have that, right? Now, that leaving aside the missile discussion for a minute, I just want to discuss how good a brawler this tank is, right? I get into a big brawl here with the WZ, and I just want to talk about the maneuverability of the tank, right? You can see I'm going backwards here. You can see this reverse speed in action here. Even with him coming front on, I'm able to stay out of his way. You can see the power to weight ratio. Even going backwards up a hill, I'm able to get out of his way. Now I can turn around, come back onto him, show him a bit of leg, pull back, bam, dumps his load too early, premature ejaculation. Oh no, my friend. Bad news for you. You're getting a 0 out of 10 score, and your Tinder profile is going to suffer, I'm afraid, because you shot your load too early. And you don't want to do that when there's a fast moving lady like this around, because she's going to tap your ass. Just look at this, speed it up, and you can see just how good a brawler this tank is. We take him out for dinner and take him out all the way. Now, again, this game now is more or less over. I just come in and I take out this WZ, this crate tank. Don't get me started on crates. I've told you before, I believe this is a form of gambling. I also don't believe that Wargaming have a gambling license, and even if they do, many of their users are under 18, which is against EU law. And against the law of most countries, you can't gamble when you're under 18. And I think that potentially they could get into trouble for this. But certainly whether or not they get into trouble legally, it's immoral to have players spend possibly $200 or $300 or euros on crates and still not get the fucking tank. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, just put it in the shop for $60 or $70 or euros. You know people are going to buy it anyway. But at least they know what they're paying for, right? And when you're using crates, it's totally unfair. They don't know that they're going to get it, right? And I just believe it's totally unfair, and it's, you know, as I said, it's certainly unethical, practically immoral, and possibly illegal. So, anyway, let's leave that aside. Rant over. Going back to this tank, you know, playing this tank as it is, as a standard tank without the missile system, it's good enough. Now, I ran an experiment in this tank. I started off playing as I'd played at T92E1, and after I think 50 or 60 games, I was running a 76% win rate, right? Then I decided for the next 50 games, I would play it and only fire missiles, right? So I didn't fire heat or APCR. The result was my win rate dropped to just over 50%. My average damage was just over 1,000, whereas I had been up at almost 3,000. And I, you know, just wasn't playing as well as I was before. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us a few things. Firstly, don't fucking do that, right? Fucking bad idea. So learn from my mistakes. Secondly, it tells us that the missiles themselves are not OP and not actually, you know, game-changing in themselves. There's a few reasons for that, as we discussed when we did the T92E1 review, right? One is that they require you to break concentration and break your normal game pattern. So basically what they're doing is, if I can use a bit of game theory and a bit of psychology for a second, they basically break or interrupt your learned behavior. So learned behavior is effectively the skill set that you acquire from playing or doing things repeatedly. It's basically doing things without having to think about them too much. So if you play football, American football, basketball, right, when you're taking a shot or throwing a pass or shooting a hoop, you don't think about it, right? You don't process all of the different calculations in your head. Your body just knows how to do it, right? It's called, so that's learned skills, right? And I found when you use the missiles, you break your normal pattern of play because first, it's disruptive, right? Because it doesn't fire like a normal missile. The roundall or the pixel, the end pixel is different, and you have to think in a different way. So interrupts your normal game flow, right? That's one thing I found, right? Second thing is that the firing dynamics are so different that it doesn't suit some kind of shots, right? It just doesn't, right? Why would you need to fire a round that's going to do 39 kilometers per hour? If that's the case, as we saw, that may not be the case. But a slow round, when you could fire an APCR round, right? If you're not using, let's say, the cheat mode on mobile, which we discussed earlier, you have to aim the missile, which means you're exposed for longer and can get hit more by the enemy, right? By the way, one of the other things that totally went down the toilet was my survival rate in the Sheridan, right? It went from, I think, 70-something% down to 40-something%. And that's one of the reasons, right? Because you have to spend longer on target. So that's not good either, right? So, you know, for those reasons, right, you know, interrupting your learned behavior and your game style and pattern of play, not suiting every kind of shot, spending more time on target, therefore exposing yourself more. And also you tend to stop more when you fire them than when you're firing normal shots in light tank. So therefore you're sort of going against the principles of light tank play, which is basically to constantly keep moving, right? So for all those reasons, the missiles themselves are not OP. The missiles themselves create a problem when they're used occasionally and sparingly to make shots that you normally wouldn't be able to make. So, for example, that shot on the E75 and the YAMAOTO and the one we saw on the mouse. So therefore, if you use them only occasionally, they can add that extra 1,000, 1,500 damage in a game that you wouldn't normally get. And that's the problem, right? So that's the issue. So what does that tell us? Well, in conclusion, you could have the tank only firing the Pramo, the missiles, in which case it wouldn't be that effective, or you can remove the missiles and just leave the tank with standard Pramo heat round. Either of those would solve the problem, I think, but that's up to Wargame. I've actually seen on forums, by the way, they're saying the Wargame might take them out completely, which sort of seems a bit of a strange move when there's a much easier fix, and also wouldn't frustrate players so much who spent a lot of XP time, credits, and sometimes even gold acquiring them, right? So, but I think, you know, that's sort of my view on this tank. You know, this tank is not OP, it's not as effective for the reasons we've discussed as a T92E1. The missile system in itself is not OP. The missile system creates sort of OP issues when it's used in conjunction with good light tank play, and it's used as an extra dimension to that. Yeah, so that would be my sort of objective, subjective, and hopefully sensible and rational view on this tank, taking away the emotion and the hyperbole around it. Now, let's have a recap. I don't think this tank is quite OP, but it is kind of borderline. But the T2E1 is definitely OP. It has limitations, and it's not as good as a tank before, right, as we've discussed, right, mainly because it doesn't get those bounces. It's a larger target with flatter armor. The missile gun, of course, is the fun gun. That's why everybody wants to get it, and it's more or less the same as the Tier 9, so those skills you acquired can help you as you go through. And get your missiles while you can, if you want to fire them, because I don't think they're going to last, but I could be wrong. You get a 13.47 second reload on this tank, or 14.5 if you use calibrated shells. It has a great power to ratio. As we said, it has that turbo diesel engine, so it's nimble, agile, mobile, traverses good, which makes it an excellent brawler. You saw that against the WZ. If you're on your own on a heavy tank, do not go out and get exposed against one of these things. You will get lit, my friend. Good alignment is good as well. Utilize that. Speed, view, range, and concealment has all the skills that a light tank needs, but bear in mind that when you're up in tier 10, there are tanks that have much superior view range, like the projectile, like the Batchat, etc. If you play this as a normal light tank, it's easier, fair, and it's better in the long term, I believe, because that's probably how the tank is going to be. It's not a good tank. It is a good tank, but it's not broken, except for that cheat thing in the mobile, if you're playing on a mobile device. And, you know, but I think that the aiming on the missile has to be changed. If they keep the missiles, I still think they have to fix that, right? Cheers, Mush. I guess that's all for me, remains for me to say. Thanks for watching. The music was Beethoven because it's a heavy subject, so I think we needed some heavy music, Symphony Number 7. So cheers, Mush. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. And I guess all that remains for me to say is pants off.